The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society.
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories. Conspiracy theories.
Conspiracy theories.
Because it is not the government of the people any longer.
Circus ridiculous.
A new world order. A world where the rule of law governs the conduct of nations.
Most people do not understand the Illuminati.
It's all about control.
Conspiracy theories.
It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations.
A new world order.
Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised.
It's the Weekend Vigilante Show.
Well, hello, listeners, and welcome to the Weekend Vigilante Show. I'm your host, Sheila Zielinski, for May 1st, 2014. I need to start off by saying this, folks. It takes a tremendous amount of work to bring my listeners a top-notch show with only the most sought-after cutting-edge guests week after week, and never before today have I ever asked for your financial support for my ministry, but today I'm asking. So please go to my website, weekendvigilante.com, and you can click the donate button there. And if you're blessed by the show, please do what you can, and I thank you in advance for your support and generosity to keep this show going. And speaking of cutting-edge guests, folks, we have a powerful, hard-hitting lineup. We're going to be joined by my good friend V, the Guerrilla Economist. I call him the Chuck Norris of financial forecasting. He's the founder of RogueMoney.net. He's highly respected and regarded for his uncanny track record of business, geopolitical, and economic trends before they come to pass, and he's a 1-2 punch to the globalist. He doesn't mince words, and joining him, the granddaddy of Premier Intel, a securities analyst we call W. He's a former intelligence operative that worked very closely with the Reagan era and was instrumental in the takedown of the Soviet Union as well as other very interesting black projects. He holds a PhD in physics. He is a spy master extraordinaire. So V and W, welcome to the program. It's a pleasure to have you both on.
Sheila, it's a pleasure. Thank you.
Wow, so much to talk about, V. You know, it's funny because this morning I'm looking at headlines, and, of course, I'm chuckling to myself. Just look at some of these headlines right out of a sci-fi. We've got 30% of American families having not one single person working. And now there's a big headline this morning. Suspicious deaths of bankers are now classified as trade secrets by a federal regulator. Obama-Biden vacation tab also reached 40 million. Ex-employees are charged for conspiracy to defraud in connection with the LIBOR. Americans' consumers are dropping, not shopping. I cannot believe this, how taxpayers are subsidizing multi-million-dollar salaries of restaurant CEOs. The U.S. military is preparing for the collapse of the dollar. Big surprise there. V, where do we start with all this?
I mean, Sheila, the news it's unrelenting. It's like trying to drink from a fire hose these days. I mean, one thing after the next. I mean, what we're seeing is the continued systemic collapse. What we're seeing is the emergence of those trade zones and those trade agreements that are popping up all over the world. Everything has to do with trading amongst their own currencies, not using the dollar. I mean, it's unprecedented. I mean, let's just touch base with the first thing that you mentioned with the bankers, these dead bankers. Now they're saying that it's a trade secret. What most people don't know, okay, is that companies like J.P. Morgan, like Barclays, like Deutsche Bank, they take out employee death insurance against their own employees. Then what they do is they take those death benefits and they bet on them. And they over-leverage those death benefits betting that the person would die. So how convenient, what a perfect business model. You put a hit out on somebody, then you leverage up their death benefits betting that this person's going to die. So each person you whack, they'll probably cost you anywhere between 20 and 50 grand to get somebody knocked off. But you've made hundreds of millions of dollars on the back end. It's a perfect model. I mean, the mafia wishes it could function this way.
I mean, this is a bad Twilight Zone episode. I mean, you mentioned, who was it, V, that accused the U.S. of living off their printing press? And Relentless is right, because remember we talked about this back in, I think it was your December show, and you had good old Carmen Reinhart, and he was saying, debt sustainability can be achieved through austerity and tolerance for higher inflation. And they're returning that back out again this week. I mean, the shenanigans and lies just never stop from these people. Here is the big question, and you're right, you predicted this as well, is what does happen when all this exported inflation comes home to roost, V, and everyone else is trading in currency that's not ours very soon?
Well, at that point, it's going to be like the Weimar Republic. Now, look, you have every single pundit in the world that talks about Weimar Republic, and it's become a sort of a catchphrase for hyperinflation. But people don't realize hyperinflation in its reality and in its entirety. You know, I remember a couple of years back, I listened to a C-SPAN interview with Dr. Friedrich Kessler, UC Berkeley professor. This guy lived through the Weimar years in Germany to the buildup of World War II. Now, one of the things that Dr. Kessler said was so profound. He said, it struck like lightning. Nobody was prepared. You couldn't buy anything in your stores. No one was ready for how fast this occurred and the absolute decimation of an individual's wealth. And that's the thing, folks. It was so bad in Weimar Republic, Germany, that if you want to mail a letter, it would have costed you 21,500,000,000 Deutschmarks in order to do that. So that's how bad it was back then. And Germany faced that because they just lost World War I. So you lost World War I, you have the French kicking the crap out of you while you're down, and all of a sudden you got this massive hyperinflation because nobody trusts your currency anymore. Our situation is much worse because our situation, unlike the Germans, is self-inflicted. Our situation is we are the world reserve currency. So our fate is not going to be something of a somewhat troubled transition back in the 30s when the pound sterling lost its reserve currency status, and after World War II, the dollar took up the slack. No. You see, we've printed so much out there, and we're so unique right now, Sheila. We're so unique in the world, and it's a unique time in the world because all the central banks in the U.S., in Europe, and the UK, and Japan, they are all printing to oblivion simultaneously, okay? So right now we're in a world where the markets are skewed and everything is floating on phantom growth. So at some point this ridiculous bubble has to burst. And when that happens, that's when you have the dollars flooding back home like a tsunami that would make the incident in Japan pale in comparison. We're going to be drowning. We're going to be drowning in our own paper.
Let's face it. I mean, you create an unrestricted and unregulated 100-year-old Federal Reserve fox watching over the Goldfield henhouse, and then you look at Bretton Woods and you kind of merge all those things together. There's nothing ever been stopping the Fed from printing, expanding the supply of these notes, and no thanks to Nixon issuing a decree that let's flood the world with these paper dollars. And let's face it, V, we've robbed every nation. Look at the Saudi oil deals, OPEC selling U.S. dollars, these foreign oil deals. They made every nation require the Federal Reserve note, hence the petrodollar scheme. And when you have an oil-backed currency outspending all the nations in the world and creating a military juggernaut, and I love what you always say, the undisputed world heavyweight superpower big dog just got kicked off the porch, and that's really where we're sitting, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's so true because this war economy model that we've been following, copied off the British, it doesn't work. This gunboat diplomacy doesn't work. You know what? The world's sick of it because, the unique thing, Sheila, this time is this. Okay, one of the highlights is this. Number one, people need to understand it is the Federal Reserve's policy for monetary debasement. In other words, folks, they have pledged that they're going to work very hard and they're going to do everything they can to absolutely wipe out your wealth. Okay? That's the first thing you realize. The moment you realize that, the better off you will be. The second thing people need to realize is that monetary debasement is the only thing they're going to do. They can't do nothing else. You want to talk about a one-trick pony, Sheila? What this is a one-trick glue horse. And the rest of the world is waking up to the fact that they cannot have an irresponsible, drunken sailor running the monetary policy of this nation.
Yeah, I mean, when you think of these sociopathic hucksters, nobody wants to do business. But let's jump into something here, V. I got inundated with one thing that everybody wants your guys' take on. And what is going on in Ukraine here? I mean, of course, you and I had talked about this violation of protocols deep in the Black Sea. But on a bigger level, I want you to weigh in on what's going on with Ukraine, because it seems like Putin wants a resurgence of the former Soviet Union, and you're all too familiar with that. He goes into the area of the confluence. We're seeing critical elements. Putin moved into Crimea, and after the clear signal, well, thankfully the media was able to capture when Obama passed the message that he'd have more flexibility. I mean, talk about conspiring with the enemy. This is just treasonous. I mean, Europe under the control of Russia, because the lifeblood is in the energy. I don't know what NATO is doing here. Putin appears to basically have positioned himself to control much of the energy on the planet, putting a stranglehold on all of Europe, threatening to revive the Cuban Missile Crisis, undermining our free trade agreements. He's arming Latin America states with high-tech weaponry. There's heavy presence of Russia in Latin America building bases. Again, we got the finger on the dollar. Gazprom, they're considered trading in euros. What is going on with all this, W?
Well, let me come at it slightly different than I think most everybody else is seeing the situation as it relates to Putin. We have been programmed to understand our world in three-way tug-of-war between China, Russia, and the U.S. as the three big dogs. And that one of us is going to be leading, which has been us for quite some time, and the other two are closing ranks together and taking us on. And so we're constantly having to do a two-fisted battle back and forth, not directly necessarily, but through our proxies, because a direct conflict has been too unthinkable because of the potential for it to escalate into a nuclear war or something like that. So we have an agreement to do it through our proxies and stay a little bit aloof. The problem is that we had this policy of creating the best enemy money could buy. World War II, on the one hand, while we were opposing the Soviet Union, we were covertly, through various mechanisms and agents, or someone was covertly using our resources to puff up the Soviet Union. And even at the end, when the wall fell, virtually no one anywhere paid attention to this little detail. David Rockefeller went to the Southern Soviet Union, his private dacha, and there he held court. And all the Russian political figures, from Yeltsin and Gorbachev's camps, the generals, the business people trying to pursue glasnost, came down and had their audience. That was the CEO reordering the mechanism, the company, if you will. And all of this time, as they've been being reordered, we were under the impression that they had rolled up and gone away. Now, this second, the Soviet Union, Russia, is in some pretty dire financial straits. Moscow has pulled all the resources from the various outer reaches back in to centralize the money that was there, and a lot of the provinces are complaining because they're literally broke, unable to function. They had to get up through the Olympics, and as I said before when V and I had an interview a while back, I said, long before the Olympics, as soon as the Olympics are over, Putin is going to come out of his corner, he's going to drop the gloves, and he's going to come out swinging. And that's exactly what has happened. But this isn't someone coming out as though he's got us beat. We're still tougher. We're still bigger. We still have all the resources. The problem is we're dysfunctional. It's like we're drunk. It's like we've been whacked on the head. And it's not going to be that difficult to take us down because we are, we've got some medical ailment, mental ailment. And so Putin, even as messed up as his system is and as screwed up as they are, he looks healthy. He looks strong. And he has great press people trying to buff up that image and to project that image, even to his own people. He's playing a role. But all of that to say It isn't about us versus Putin or us versus China or any of their proxies. That is all stagecraft. People that are running these operations, including inside of our own government, are on all sides of this conflict. A few moments ago, you mentioned the Illuminati. Okay, yes. And they're behind all of this because they're managing us and the Russians and the Chinese to a new world currency. And in order to get us there, they have to first destroy the currency that is the de facto world currency right now, which is the dollar. And part of that destruction, which has to be sure there can be no error, no single point failure in their mechanism to drive the dollar to dust. So on multiple fronts, the dollar has been attacked within the financial institutions, country to country, within the various trade arrangements. Our ability to support the dollar on the energy as the petrodollar, every single front, the dollar is at risk, and any one of them could cause the dollar to collapse, but they're all in crisis, and not minor crisis, catastrophic crisis. So that on command, they can push the red button, boom, we get brand new world currency trading system. And that will be some variation, some extrapolation of secure drawing rights.
What do you think that would look like, W? I mean, we've talked about this potential backed ruble. V, you've talked about that. We've talked about the yuan. What does that look like on the ground?
Here's the deal. With the new currency, the way that they want it to work, they want us out of the picture. See, a lot of Americans have this attitude that they have to have us, that we will have to be some kind of a component in this new world trading system. And the reality is they don't need us at all. In fact, we're a problem. What they need us to do is get out of the way while they institute this new system, to be unable to function so internally focused that we're not projecting power at all. And that makes us at the mercy of these international unelected players who come in to fix the system, and they're going to fix it, believe me. And when they do that, we will wake up with no alternative but to bow into this system. Our dollar will still exist, but it will be as just another currency, and a very weakened currency, and a very embarrassed country and currency. Will be a laughingstock. People will be pointing at us, because part of what's really coming here, before the dollar gets taken down, and this is the instant we're in right now, the world has to first see us as villains. So it's the villainization of America, the villainization of the American system. Everything American has to be villainized so that people won't just prefer to use a different currency. They will choose other currencies as a protest vote, as a kick in the seat of the pants because of who we are. They won't just leave the dollar, they'll run from the dollar. And we're going to be pointed at as the boogeyman. That's what's afoot.
And isn't it funny, W, that years ago we used to really be the envy of the world? People around the world, they watched our cowboys, they watched our sheriffs on TV, and they said the bad guy will not come up against the pinnacle, the great bash, the beacon for the world, because we used to be a moral compass. But, that ship has sailed a long time ago, hasn't it?
Well, I think there's maybe a slight nuance of what I'd say. At its core, the good guys. Unfortunately, our government has been captured. In intelligence operations, capture somebody else's covert system. Because of compartmentalization, a lot of times people down through the chain don't realize ultimately who's further up the chain that are the controllers, where their information is going precisely. Their handler is just the next person in the chain in order to protect identities, protect the mechanisms, means and methods. And so what's happened is that our system has been captured, and the links in the chain that make every American who they are and make them function a certain way, those links somewhere at the top of the chain have been put over onto somebody else's harness to do somebody else's work. not necessarily in our best interest as American people. And my concern is, and our concern should be, as we fight to get reattached to what was classic America and our classic role, is to make sure that the world is able to distinguish those people that are in power right now, both in the political system and the economic houses, from the American people. In this villainization, we still, more than ever, as individuals, have to stand strong, clear, resolute. And even things like these recent incidents, whether it be the Bundy Ranch or other incidences, we need to stand up as citizens individually and make it clear that there's things occurring here around us that we as human beings don't agree with. For example, Syria. I would hope the whole world sees that while our government, the people in power at the highest levels, wanted to get us in there under a ruse 4 different times, the people would not go along, and even our military would not go along with the scamming, and we didn't go into Syria. It is a battle of wills. Those people who have captured our system, those people who have captured some of our leadership, the people behind the curtains who are manipulating our system, they are different than we the people. And we don't have to go in the streets with guns, but we do have to make our character, our personages, visible to the world as being the same people that we always were in our ideals, to what is currently being exercised in our name, and wrongly so.
But you're right. We did fail in Syria. So what? Let's go to Ukraine and isolate the rest. I mean, jump in on this, V, because I'd like to know what the real playbook is, because you can't just isolate the world's commodity kingpin and manufacturing kingpin here either. What's really going on here, V?
I'm glad that W weighed in on this, because, once again, here we have 2 different guys from 2 different ends of the spectrum. And what he just said lays perfectly from what I've been told. And the playbook is this. The playbook, it made sense, because when W said that they want to have us so busy that we're going to be, dealing with all the turmoil here, I got the image of remnants of groups of individuals, trying to reclaim classic Americana. And the reason for this is this: they are the City of London has said, we're going to isolate America. And what I've been told is there's not going to be no World War III, where they're not going to allow any sort of sanctions to go through against the Russians, that they're going to do everything in their power to isolate America. And, often, as I said in prior broadcasts, I mean, guys, we're not being looked at as the probable cause. We're not being looked at as a maybe involved over here. No, we're actually being vetted. We're being vetted as the source for every single fraud imaginable in the financial market, from LIBOR to the bond market to the Forex to the real estate to the stock market. I mean, the list goes on and on. The fraud is the gold market. I mean,
the derivatives.
Derivatives. God,
Let me weigh in here for 1 second. We've discussed all of those areas. People are familiar with them. In some ways, it almost seems like it's old news. It's not, but it's, because they've heard it, they figure they know everything already about it, and so, yeah, I've heard all about that. Okay, so let me tell you something you don't know. Do you realize that right now, in a federal court in New York, a judge is days away from deciding a bankruptcy case? In that bankruptcy case are MERS mortgages. And those mortgages amount to, in that one particular case, about 1 in every 100 homes in the entire United States. Now, this is only one of several cases going on. But here's what the judge is being asked to do. Go ahead and complete a bankruptcy, allow all of the paper and the underlying mortgages to be sold to Berkshire Hathaway for fractions of cents on a dollar. It's about a $400 billion value of the mortgages. They're going to let them have it for about $5 billion. So what would happen then, once the judge decides to allow the bankruptcy to go through, is that anyone paying on their mortgage, even years from now, as the word finally sifts out to various people, they think they're paying off their mortgage and they go in to get title to their home, they find out, oh yeah, that bank that you were paying the money to, yeah, they didn't actually own the mortgage. They just had the note. And so now you got to go deal with those guys and see if you can have your home. Or it could very well be they'll let it sit for a while because they don't want to stir the pot too much. But all of a sudden, a couple of years down the road, you can be coming home from work one day or coming home from a baseball game with the kids, and there on the door is the papers posted and all your furniture out in the front yard because you've been evicted because it's not your house. And the money you've been paying on your mortgage didn't go to the company that actually has the underlying paper. And this is a huge, monstrous thing because as you get deeper and deeper into it, we're not talking just a couple of percent of the properties. We're talking probably over 50% of the properties in the United States being separated on who owns the home and who owns the mortgage. And you could very well wake up without your retirement nest egg a lot sooner than you dreamed.
Kind of almost sounds like a Dodd-Frank playbook, because Agenda 21 as well, because, I mean, really, W, why should you have any land or home or anything else? They want you stacked and packed in little green micro-cities anyway, so it's all really part of the playbook, isn't it, though?
Here's the real crisis, and this is what makes it instant. This is why this isn't about a problem that's going to really get worked out over a few years or that could really erupt in a few years. And V knows this also. With houses, property prices are made in the margins. So if you only have 3 or 4% more houses on the market than there is buyers, then housing prices go down pretty radically, pretty quickly. They'll go down 10, 15% on 3% of surplus houses in the market. Conversely, if there's 3 or 4% less houses than there is buyers, prices will go up radically to stabilize it out. Well, in this situation, what's going to happen is that people will be finding out during the course of this year and into the next spring that a lot of these properties are in question. If you're going to buy a house and you can't be guaranteed, even by the title company, that you're going to get conveyed clear title, or a lender can't be guaranteed that you can get clear title at the end of the contract, what lender is going to lend on a home? And how long does it take for this to get unraveled, sorted out, fixed? Months? Many, many months? Another government guarantee? We're going to guarantee until we figure it out. That's what merge is all about. So the problem is we could very well have this hiccup in a major section of our economy that doesn't allow money to flow. Now, here's why it's so critical. You got to hear this. This is so critical. The amount of money that actually exists in circulation month to month is not the amount of money that you have over a whole year, because it keeps exchanging hands. You know, people pay their mortgages, and the people who have mortgage pay their lenders, and the lenders loan money back out, and it goes for shoes from one company and McDonald's at another. That money keeps circulating. And when you get a hiccup of a major type like this, where people can't go in and refinance their house, they can't get a buyer on their house, they can't sell their house, when the banks don't lend because of it, all of a sudden a significant portion of our economy holds its breath. It doesn't respirate. The flow of money in the economy is like respiration. You can do without food for a couple of months. You won't be happy and you won't be comfortable, but you'll live. You can do without water for many days. Sometimes in a horrible emergency earthquake or something, somebody will be trapped for a couple of weeks. But without air in a couple minutes, you are brain dead and then physically dead. If the money doesn't flow because of any hiccup, any one of these various things that we're talking about right now, becomes a serious blockage from us being able to breathe, it chokes the economy, the domino effect throughout other areas of the economy, it's catastrophic and it's near instantaneous. And that's the problem. That's the big red button. People don't see it coming. And like V was talking about with the Weimar Republic, when the Weimar Republic fell, people don't go back that little bit further and remember that at the end of World War I, the Deutschmark traded on par, even Steven, with the dollar. It went to, $1 trillion to 1. And here, with our situation is here, same thing with what happened with the Weimar Republic. It was worse. People were talking about it. They knew there was an issue, and then suddenly, bang, there was a triggering series of events, not just one. Why? Because it was by design. It was intentional, and that's exactly what's happening here. This is an intentional plan to take out the dollar, to pave the way by these New World Order people to create the moment when they can then bring in what they've been talking about, planning, telling us is coming for decades.
So let me ask you this, W. You mentioned Clive and Bundy, and I think of these economic investment zones, and I think of that land. They're really essentially agreements that, if the U.S. defaults, China can go in, boots on the ground, and claim the natural resources and any other thing. They've got them in South America and Africa. I mean, certain economic zones being run by Russia and China. So if China's building these special economic zones, I don't know how many, there's 5 or something of them, and, they're collecting their debt because, let's face it, the debt card is up here. Essentially, it's not American law in these agreements. It's Chinese law. So it gives the Chinese full authority to go, like I said, boots on the ground, claim the natural resources. If China owns our debt and owns the Fed, and the Fed lends money to your bank, they lend it to you. So not only does China own your home, but your mortgages, your 401ks, your pension, your energy. Is that part of this as well?
This is very astute on your part because you have nailed what I believe is actually the real risk here. This bankruptcy in New York is actually a precedent setter. That's why it has to be stopped immediately. Because the other paper, the other instruments that are out there have been being bought up, of all people, by Russian and Chinese investors. And what they will have by international law is the right to come in and seize properties, including, if they need to, with private security forces.
Bingo.
It's an underhanded, sneaky way of coming in to protect their assets that they have a legal right to. And they could literally kick people out of whole regions, whole neighborhoods, because of the need to protect their property. And we're being maneuvered into this situation by treasonous, traitorous people within our system, not just political people, but business people. I think this is absolutely by design. And that's why, the person you should really have on in part about this particular bankruptcy is an author out of Canada, Marinka Peshman.
I'm familiar with her.
She's an outstanding author. She's done fantastic work, and she's got the point on this particular lawsuit out there and on some of the underlying issues related to these transactions. But beyond that, there's other cases that are just now coming to the fore, and ones that will set precedents that will, all of a sudden, we won't be able to, stop what's coming because these courts say, well, we've decided this case and this is what we've all agreed to, and so here we are.
Well, it's really interesting, and I want V to jump in on this because I think also about how many thousands of troops and then the Chinese and the Russians participating in our own Grid-X drills. To me, the word that comes to mind here is subjugation. Effectively own all our resources, our energy grid, and it's a nice setup for an arena for complete subjugation. I mean, do you think that's the playbook here, V?
I think the playbook is chaos. And here's why. There's going to be many facets across this country that will resist. There's areas, unfortunately, in places like California that will absolutely, bend over backwards and do whatever is necessary and go along with the program, so to speak. There's areas in New York, New Jersey that, do the same thing. But there will be bastions where there will be resistance. And that's the whole entire thing. The whole entire thing is about creating chaos. okay, and being inured in chaos. The Chinese and the Russian factions that will be here, they primarily will be here in order to safeguard and secure their assets. And that's what they're trying to do. And that's what, you look at why China's been purchasing idle manufacturing throughout the nation. Right down, in Newark, across the bridge, Newark, Jersey City, Camden, Pittsburgh, Detroit, Cleveland. They're buying up these factories for pennies on the dollar, retooling them. The question is why? Well, they know when this whole thing hits the fan, the American labor force will be the cheapest there is in the world, number one. Number two, you have these economic zones. About 2 hours away from where I live, you go into Sullivan County, New York, you have a China city that's being built right there. It's an economic zone. So these are the underhanded deals. And one thing that W said so perfectly, especially with MERS, is this. Folks, what these guys have done with MERS is the same thing they have done with derivatives. They have made it absolutely convoluted. They have made it absolutely complicated that it would take them decades and decades and decades just to unravel the mess that MERS is. And MERS affects over 70, close to even 80% of mortgages that are being put out now is all on MERS. So you can imagine the catastrophic situation that's arising from this, number one. Number two, you can see the potential in the old, switcheroo, where if that bankruptcy right here in New York goes through and they award Berkshire Hathaway $5 billion on $400 billion worth of mortgages, it's unprecedented because then Berkshire Hathaway could either sell it off to somebody else and then more likely a foreign entity, or a foreign entity like China could just outright buy Berkshire Hathaway. And then who has your mortgage? So take that into heart. Now, another thing that's happening is right here in New York, 60% of lower Manhattan, 60% of all the commercial real estate, I think probably even 65%, are owned by the Chinese. About a week ago, I was having dinner with my wife in Little Italy, and it's amazing how here's Little Italy right on Mulberry Street in Elizabeth, and Chinatown is slowly encroaching into Little Italy. It's unprecedented. So there's massive transitions happening, and the thing with MERS is just another financial weapon of mass destruction and distraction. And there will be sectors of people that simply will not deal with it. Just like they drew a line in the sand with that whole Bundy thing. I'm telling you, there are sections in this country, they're getting ready to shoot. So, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But I think that's the overall game plan. The game plan is to have total chaos over here in the United States while the rest of the world gets integrated into this new monetary system that's emerged.
Well, and let me chime in here for just to tag team in on that. The theme that is the precedence-setting theme of the New World Order is what? Out of chaos, order. Well, where'd the chaos come from? By design, they create the chaos, and then they have a resolution. They have a plan for the far side of the chaos. The chaos is not an accident. To most people, it looks like a savior is born. A savior has come to save us from this horrible crisis that just came out of nowhere. Who could have seen it coming? It didn't come out of nowhere. It was a plan. This is a magic act. This is flim-flam men creating a spectacle and then suddenly arriving at the accident scene with bandages and gauze and everything that's needed to help repair everybody. Shoot, they're the ones that dug the hole in the ditch out into the road, created a mechanism where there was going to be an accident in the first place. This is a plan. Now, the reason that we have to think about it in those terms is because we probably at this point can really do nothing. Stop what is about to hit us. If you think you're going to stop this freight train by standing on the tracks and waving your arms, you'll see us next in the next life. You're gone. You're not going to make it. You're not going to stop this. What you have to do, what every individual has to do, is to understand the crisis that's been created. Understand how they've been made a straw man for other people to take down to accomplish some end that they have in mind. And then decide, the scripture says, a wise man sees trouble and gets out of the way. So if you can see this is coming, if you can see that standing on the tracks and waving your arms isn't going to stop it, that what is about to happen is imminent. We are past the point of no return. Now you have to decide, is there a lifeboat available? What am I going to do to get out of the way, to buy time? I don't think this is about buying 10 years of food and going into your missile silo. This is about when this hits, you need to be able to stay viable and functional with a very, very, very tiny foot period of about 90 days, maybe up to 6 months if you're really lucky. 30 at least, to be under the radar, not having to get into a government line in an instant, not being visible to all your neighbors, fat and happy, we got plenty of food, too bad about you. Very low profile, but able to function, take care of your family, and not have to count on anything working. Think post-Katrina. There will be a reset, and then it'll start to find a new order, a new balance. In that window, you have to be able to be viable, to survive, to be functional. It may be you have to just pick up and you got a cousin, a brother, a sister that lives a little more rurally. The cities are going to be the worst place to be. And you don't want to be absolutely out there on the side of a glacier in Timbuktu, Alaska. You need to be somewhere where there's hospitals, some infrastructure, some people know you and you know them, some place where you have a sense of community that's on the fringes, on the edge, but not in the middle of the cluster that is dependent on just-on-time groceries, just-on-time resources, huge sewage systems and water systems, etc., maybe has its own well. Why? Because all of these systems, for 100 different reasons, could be dysfunctional for a period of time, and then it starts to come back and find some sense of order. This is somebody pushing the reset switch. While the reset switch has been pressed, everything just doesn't work for a bit. It is kind of like an EMP in a very real way. And then we have to find out how we're going to balance out and fit into this new world order on the far side. That's what I think is the disconnect. Most people see Armageddon, end of the world, I'm going to be raptured out, I'm going to, it's no worry for me. Well, baloney. You got kids, you got grandkids, you have friends. You have to think in terms of surviving that instant, having an oxygen supply to keep breathing for a little bit to get to the far side of this instant crisis and then try to reorder, find a new balance. And at the end of the day, these madmen, their plan will fail. It has always failed throughout the course of human history. It's always failed when they've tried to create a one-world anything. But in the interim, you got to survive. Some of the good guys have to survive long enough to be there to put this thing back together again on the far side so the good guys can repair and move on when this madness, this insanity collapses, as it must do. God will not allow these insaniacs to win the day. But only people who have it in their hearts and their minds, have gone in with intent, will be able to survive through to the far side, God willing, this thing back together again and make it work the way it's always been supposed to work, in spite of the insanity that's about to hit us.
I was thinking as you were talking, it's interesting because now even it's chirping out of the pulpits is, even Kenneth Copeland's saying we should be looking at a new world religion. They're always talking about a one world currency, a one world order, the new everything. It's always merged and amalgamated. I mean, we look at that nukes debacle back in October. A lot of intel said, he was kind of hoping to just wipe out how many people. I mean, we are getting pummeled 6 ways to Sunday here. And always some distraction over here. Oh, look at it. Could be a little conductor that they were working on technology with the Illuminati kingpin, the Rothschild. It's distraction over here, distraction with the NBA, the NFL, whatever it is. I mean, what's the bottom line playbook, W?
These people want to own the world for them and their families, their kin. And the rest of us are useless eaters. What you're really looking at is two parallel civilizations. Those that have sectioned themselves off with resources, with assets, with the businesses and those that are really the rest of the world. They, because of technology in their minds, they don't believe that they need everybody that's here. And as the Chinese found out, sometimes there just isn't enough bullets. And so you literally need people to take care of each other, take each other out. And in the meantime, you can make a buck here and there, a la Syria and other stuff. In the course, it's a twofer, it's a threefer. We depopulate the planet, and we make a buck in the meantime, and we get some resources, and we get some focused attention to improve technology. But at the end of the day, this new world order doesn't need everybody here. And in fact, there's multiple precedents through history where these madmen have seen fit to wipe out huge portions of their populations in order to get rid of people that they felt were a threat. Look at Stalin, 50 million starved to death in the Ukraine. 50 million people starved to death, cannibalizing each other. It's just too horrible to think if you really think it through. China, on multiple occasions in the last 2,000 years, depopulated almost 90% of its population on one occasion, 60 and 70% on several occasions, because their fearless leader in those eras felt that other groups were a threat to them. We're in one of those moments right now. And to a civilized mind, to your listeners, it sounds completely ridiculous. It sounds insane. But you are like the doctor in Dr. Zhivago. You're trying to apply your logic, your reasoning to madmen's minds. They're mad. Evil exists, and they see you as a threat. If you survive, you're a threat to them. Remember the Godfather movie. What did the guy want to do? He wanted to kill the Godfather when he was a young child, even though he supposedly is a little brain dead because he killed the dad. And the guy says, no, because when you grow up, you'll come kill me. So I need to kill you now. I need to kill him right now. And the mother pleads for his life. He's a dumb kid. Yeah, but when he grows up, he'll come kill me. He'll get strong. He'll come kill me. That's the way they're looking at you. These Americans in their Constitution, they're a threat. We need to get the oath. Otherwise, when they grow up, they'll be a threat. Why take a chance? Get rid of them. They serve their purpose. You're a straw man. You've been puffed up by these people to serve a purpose. You're like the Titanic. Too big to sink. Too many things engineered in so it can't possibly sink. And you don't realize that it's fatally flawed by design. Did not have enough lifeboats.
But we're talking about Auschwitz on steroids here. Would you agree with this, W?
Yes, that's how serious it is. That's what my concern is for every one of your listeners. It sounds like, oh my gosh, they're off the rails, it's Armageddon. No, you can go through and look at the minds of these people out of chaos order. Do you realize right now that America and NATO, the United States government and NATO, started a conflict in Syria, something approaching 250,000 people dead. The people that we're supporting are cutting the hearts out of people and eating them, tying up small children to fences and forcing them to watch as their parents are torn asunder one limb at a time. Little children having to watch that. That is evil off the charts, and we are the ones who put those people in that conflict. And if you think, well, it's all Muslims, excuse me, it's the Alawites, and that's the Christian community.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, this madness right now may seem like it's afar off. But the other thing is, just as I was talking with Tosh Plumley last night on Hagman and Hagman,
right.
These arms are all through Mexico and South America, and we're not talking light arms hunting rifles. We're talking anti-aircraft. We're talking bazookas. We're talking grenades and landmines, all with U.S. markings and serial numbers that came from our inventory, and it didn't come from a gun shop. And it's sitting right there, and it's been getting piled up there for a very long time. The reason that our police are being militarized is because all of that heavy weaponry is going to come back on us. When you have an explosion, if you've watched those explosions of nuclear bombs out in the test range, and you see all the blast go out that hits the house and the cars and everything else, you know what the most destructive part of a nuclear bomb explosion is? It isn't the heat, and it isn't the explosive blast. It is the implosion after it has reached its full capacity of expansion. Why? Because all the debris is circling around in there. What happens with tornadoes? Picks up all this debris, and when it comes back in, it impales, it pulverizes, it smashes, it destroys everything in its path. The implosion from what we have done here, forcing everything out, including our dollars, into the rest of the world, as they come racing back into the United States, the clutter, the debris coming with it will absolutely pulverize everything you know. It's going to be horrible. And you have to get real. I know that this is very hard words for most people, and it sounds like, gosh, I got to just turn this off. I don't want to, this, they're over the top. We're not.
Well, I don't think people really understand the magnormity, if you will, of really what's coming and the lateness of the hour. I mean, jump in here, V. What do you think?
It's to say that it's cognitive dissonance is it's an understatement. It really is. You have varying degrees of denial. You have those who feel that I'm a part of the system, so therefore I'm okay. The system will somehow look out for me. You have others who don't want to deal with it at all. They have their head in the sand, and they feel that reality won't come and kick them right in the rear end. And you have those who just completely are wishy-washy. They know the truth, but they're so inept in order to make the necessary decisions and changes in their life in order to react with the information that's been given to them as truth. So this is what we're facing here. And it's only a small percentage of people that actually do wake up, recognize the threat, and make appropriate preparation to weather the storm that's coming ahead. I mean, there is a storm coming. How it would all play out, I don't know. But it will be varying degrees of chaos. It will be varying degrees of tumult and blowback. I mean, you want to talk about, you reap what you sow. I mean, for over 40 years, we've been sowing whirlwinds of destruction throughout the world, and that's what's going to come back to haunt us 10 times. And this is what I feared the most. Today I was kind of thinking and musing, and I actually put it up in my article. I just put a new article up on roguemoney.net. It's called the Teutonic Silk Road, and I'm basically talking about the whole Chinese-German connection. And I said to myself, when you have the whole entire world realigned in a trade agreement and America isolated, think about that. Oftentimes you have pundits that talk about Russian and Chinese subs coming up and blowing us to smithereens, or we're going to die in a nuclear holocaust. But, folks, you have to understand something. What is worse? I mean, what is more judgment? To have us all wiped out in a nuclear holocaust, or to have such chaos here? Because the way of life of what we've known for such a long time no longer exists. What's more judgment? That we are now living that we'll be living in a third world cesspool of incredible violence, incredible degradation, incredible depravity, incredible poverty. This is what we're facing in most areas in the country. That's what this nation will be transitioning into. And that's the judgment right there. I cannot fathom all the years of subliminal programming, all the years of debauchery, all the years of violence that's been pumped through television and entertainment and music. We have a population here that is downright animalistic. So imagine, if you will, a nation given over onto itself. That's horrible. I would much rather die in a nuclear holocaust than face something like that.
Yeah. Let me just chime in just a couple of quick words, and that is, remember, if we have something approaching a dollar collapse, some kind of a banking crisis, let's say it was just 30 days, and then it started to find a new normal, what kind of chaos would exist in your city, in your community, in a 30-day period where the bank tellers don't work, the bank machines don't work, the system isn't functioning correctly, and people are hungry and they can't get their Starbucks. They don't have their caffeine, they don't have their cigarettes, they don't have their alcohol, they don't have their meds, just can't breathe. You're choking as a country for just 30 days. What's that going to look like? And not that it's the end of the world and it's not going to stop. If let's say it came over miraculously, it was all solved in 30 days, completely solved and everything's working again. What kind of chaos would exist in that brief period?
Well, we're really drinking the blowback from a criminal cartel, all this splintering and these birth pangs of this new economic system. But the bigger question becomes is, what do you think people need to do? Because, they don't even care about the butchering of the brethren or anything going on anywhere because, hey, the iPhone 6 is coming out. Hey, there's an NBA game on. It is one dumbed-down, mind-numbing, dystopic trance that people are walking around in. And let's face it, while Rome burns around us, they're shrugging their shoulders. Steve Quayle, as you guys know, can attest to this. Hagman's, we're just complete fear-mongering lunatics. I get hammered pretty hard. What is the answer?
When you try to put this all into some kind of a context, you have to remember, you mentioned Rome. This has happened before. These families that are bringing this chaos on us, they have an emblem, a symbol that you see over and over again in the societies where they have planted themselves, and that symbol is that of a phoenix. The phoenix bird. And it self-immolates, and then out of its ashes is born its replacement. And it rises up and spreads out and prevails for a period of time, and then it is immolated, self-immolated. And then another one. That's Greece, that's Rome, that's America. And we're going to go through that again. The model has happened over and over several times. So you have to get out of this mental lock that you have that it can't happen here, that it's not possible for it to happen here because it's never happened in your lifetime. That's the thing you learn when you go to other countries where you've been there as power has changed from one group to another and the chaos has reigned for a period of time. That's what we're looking at here. A criminal mob has taken control of your country. Probably happened quite some time ago, but their grip, their reign, their control on the country has tightened measurably in the last decade or two. And we have to understand, be wise, and understand that at this point we're not going to stop what they have planned next. So we have to be able to survive that blow, get in a stance that you can, take the blow, absorb the blow, stay on your feet, and then, get ready to, re-engage. That's the moment you're in. You see it coming. You brace for a car accident. You brace for something you see coming. If you don't see it coming, you might get killed by it. You might not get out of the way just enough. Every one of your listeners, this is probably the 10th, 15th time that they've heard some variation of this message. And the question is, what have you done about it? But now we are very, very, very close. The news that's out there is of a type that you can no longer dismiss. You can no longer blow off the way you did before. And you should know, just by listening to the people that are in positions of leadership across the country, would you trust any of them to sell you a new or used car? Really?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
If you wouldn't trust them to sell a car to you, you're going to trust your retirement to them? You're going to trust your wealth to them? You're going to trust the well-being of your children to them? They don't care about your children. They only care about themselves. They're feathering their own nest. They're feathering their own kids' nests. Why? Because for them, even those that won't live much past this change, it is about the future. They're trying to own the future, not just for themselves, but for their families. And that's why we have to not be children about this or stick our heads in the sand. We have to be just as adamant in behalf of our blood, our relatives, including, I might add, those who are of a like heart and a like mind. Thank God that there's plenty of Americans that think just like every one of your audience. We are not alone here, but what we have to do is be resolute and united in our understanding and in our focus here so that we can survive through to the far side, because this madness will not prevail and win.
W, what's the answer to all this? We sure cannot listen to the mega churches spew out any kind of resolvable answers, because according to them, don't be focusing on your negativity. They're too busy grabbing it, blabbing it, name it, and claiming the jets and the $9 billion mansion. So what is the focus? 10 minutes of the show, each make points of what we need to be doing here.
Well, I'll just answer very quickly. All of those are captured operations, I think, at this point in time, and that's the way we have to view it. Trust but verify. V and I have spoken privately about this and a little bit publicly. I believe for most of your listeners, if they just get pre-64 coinage, not for collector value, but just for the weight of the silver in it, what we call bag silver on the West Coast, and it's called something else on the East Coast. But it's junk silver. And the reason you want coinage is because it's recognizable and it's not easy to duplicate or counterfeit. If you have, silver ingots or even gold ingots, well, somebody's got to figure out if it's actually real or if it's just a fake. And if its purity is real, etc., and, nobody wants to trade because they don't know for sure if it's good or not. The coinage is very recognizable. It is actually legal tender. And, you're not trying to buy a car or a house with it. You're trying to stay alive, food and water. Maybe to travel, to gas to get to a relative's or some other destination. So if you have some of that, right now the price is relatively low. Whatever the price is, pay it. You're going to pay a premium because it's real as opposed to some paper transaction. But I think that's one of the, and as you get into platinum and palladium and gold itself, those become more and more difficult because the value is higher, it's less easily recognizable by most people, and at the end of the day, what are you really going to use it for?
Do you realize that my contacts in Asia are paying $1,600 and $1,800 an ounce right now? That they would love to be paying $1,300 plus the 4, 5, 6% premiums that are out there in the market. They would love to be paying that amount. And that's the thing, folks. You need to understand, okay, every aspect of dollar supremacy is coming to an end. Everything that you relied upon, this paper obsession that you have, it has to end. It has to end, because I'm getting to a point where I'm starting to believe my contacts. And what I mean by that is this. My contacts have no faith in the average American. And I've hung out for so long saying, maybe the average Joe would wake up. But things being the way they are and how obsessed we are about things that are simply not important is absolutely astounding to me. Folks, you have a very, very limited time. I tell people, if you need metals right away, call Steve. I use Steve. My clients have used him. He gets it to you the next day. You need consultation. You need somebody to talk to that can tell you exactly where to put your funds, out of the country, out of harm's way, how to do it. Give me a call and I'll steer you right. The time is short. Take advantage of it. People that need credit help, contact me. I'm a Wall Street guy who'll wipe the slate clean for you. I'm not talking about debt consolidation. I literally mean wipe the slate clean. So reach out. Guys, I can help you. I mean, I'm telling you right now, the times that we're able to come on the air and talk about this stuff, that window of opportunity, how many more programs do you think we could possibly do? It's really not that much, because the times of us actually coming on the air, that day is fast approaching where that opportunity will no longer be there. And then what do you do? I mean, come on. If you got kids, what are you thinking? Wake up. And that's what I'd like to say to people. Sheila, I'll hand it back to you.
Well, I really appreciate you fellas tuning in, VNW. It was really a pleasure to have you on today. And again, folks, go to roguemoney.net and also go to weekendvigilante.com and like us on Twitter, add us on Facebook. Give us your feedback on the show. Send in show suggestions. We always value that too. Thank you very much, audience, for tuning in today to the Weekend Vigilante.